One of the people who's profited by Santa Maddalena and who has brought renown to it is Zadie Smith. And she will read next. Her first novel, White Teeth, was the winner of the Whitbread First Novel Award and the Guardian First Book Award, the James Tait Black Memorial Prize for Fiction, and the Commonwealth Writers Book Award. Her third novel, On Beauty, was shortlisted for the Booker and won the 2006 Orange Prize for Fiction. She is also the author of The Autograph Man and a collection of essays, Changing My Mind.
I want to talk to you a bit about the impressionability of writers. Writers are always talking about themselves as if they're these great engines of creativity and self-producing meaning machines. But I think their most characteristic quality is how impressionable they are and how easily influenced. Kingsley Amis hit the nail on the head when he accused his son in the middle of an argument as being a leaf in the wind of trend. I have a little theory about the second books of young writers, for example. If you check them out, they often have scenes set in airports, lots and lots of scenes set in airports. Why? Usually because they've just come back from a book tour. And the same thing goes for retreats. It's not a one-way operation. You always think the writers are at retreats completely within their work, but retreats strike back. They have a kind of effect. They have a shadow. And for me, the effect of Santa Maddalena was visual. Before I went to Santa Maddalena, I think Bea would say I was not the most visual of people. I managed to write a whole novel in which lots of people speak to each other, but no scenes are ever actually set. But after Santa Maddalena, I noticed that in my writing, there's an increased description of place, sometimes intense description of place. And I wanted just to read a few paragraphs as example. The first one is from The Autograph Man, and it's not just a description of place influenced by Santa Maddalena, it's a description of Beatrice's apartment, which at the time was the nicest apartment I had ever seen, and remains so. So this is a lightly fictionalized version. I don't know how pleased she was about it, but like a writer, I stole it anyway. Alex attempted orientation. He was here. There was no feeling of disappointment. It was, as he had foreseen, a home for European trinkets, rescued, he imagined, from fire and theft and revolution. It was the home of a collector. It had its New York touches, of course. Capacious windows, indecipherable modish art. From this lounge he could see down the mirrored hallway, straight through a bedroom to a New York bathroom, white-tiled, with ancient leaky shower fitting, and aquamarine verdigris steadily eating the copper taps. But its heart, this was resolutely old world. An imposing stone Buddha, as big as an 8-year-old, sat by the doorway, bearing the loss of its nose with great fortitude. A wire and silk lotus flower rested in its lap. A girl in an etching looked over her shoulder. The likenesses of dogs were everywhere, shaped as bookends, embodied in ornaments, embroidered on pillows, painted on mugs. And then, when one looked again, they resolved themselves into the one dog, one aristocratic breed, stubby-legged, cream-coloured baton with abbreviated black snout, bulbous eyes, and crumpled forehead. Two mahogany cabinets with mother-of-pearl trim stood opposite each other on 8 wooden paws. Everywhere, white linen throws, Arabic arches and Venetian prints, beaten thin cowhide rugs, and pink silk shot through cream pillows, unravelling. Ornate silver mirrors hung at dipping angles, seeming to catch the room just before it fell through the floor. Everything made with care and handled with same. Alex thought of his days and the rooms they had always been spent in, where the furniture came packed flat and required cajoling before it would stand upright and live. Of course, Bea would never be so vulgar as to have a large Buddha in her apartment. That was there for thematic purposes. The second short description, I wanted to make the point that when you're away from home, sometimes, as people always say, the point where you feel home most vividly. And I'd lived in the area I'd lived in my whole life without ever describing it very well. And sitting in Italy, in Bea's house, I was able to see it a lot better than I'd ever seen it before. And this is just a paragraph about Hampstead Heath, which I have lived 20 minutes away from forever, but never really seen. A sprawling North London parkland, composed of oaks, willows and chestnuts, yews and sycamores, the beech and the birch, that encompasses the city's highest point and spreads far beyond it, that is so well planted it feels unplanned, that is not the country but is no more a garden than Yellowstone, that has a shade of green for every possible felicitation of light, that paints itself in russets and ambers in the autumn, canary yellow in the splashy spring, with tickling bush grass to hide teenage lovers and joint smokers, broad oaks for brave men to kiss against, mown meadows for summer ball games, hills for kites, ponds for hippies, an icy Lido for old men with strong constitutions, mean llamas for mean children, and for the tourist, a country house, its facade painted white enough for any Hollywood close-up, complete with a tea room. Although anything you buy from there should be eaten outside with the grass beneath your toes, sitting under the magnolia tree, letting the white upturned bells of blossom, blush pink at their tips, fall all around you. Hampstead Heath, glory of London, where Keats walked and Jarman fucked, where Orwell exercised his weakened lungs, and Constable never failed to find something holy. The last bit I want you to read is, I'm going to read, is from Changing My Mind. And the greatest gift that Santa Maddalena gave to me and that Bea gave to me was an Italian life and a very bad version of the Italian language, which I now have just about. And this is just a paragraph about the square I ended up living in Rome for 2 years, and it would have literally been unwritable and unthinkable had I not met Bea. It's about Anna Magnani, the piece, but this is just about the square. In the Piazza della Madonna dei Monti, in the Ombra di Colosseo, expats gather to complain. Not about the piazza itself, which is generally agreed to be among the prettiest in Rome. The central cafe, shrouded in pink bougainvillea, looks out upon a two-tiered fountain, mercifully cherub-free. The thin white column of a Ukrainian Orthodox church is discreet, unexpected. Depending on the hour, we watch mighty carved American kids drink cheap hock straight from the bottle. Tanned Roman girls chain-smoking, dressed in the sunset silks they bought in Mumbai. Hipster gays en route to Testaccio, 3 boxer dogs, delighted German tourists who think themselves the first to discover the place, very old Italians of suspicious vitality. 2 boys use the church door as a goal mouth, and a beautiful young man who's been sleeping rough here for 6 months after disagreement with his girlfriend. The young man is much appreciated. He's a sort of local colour for which we came to Rome in the first place. His stench is monitored, sweet in the 1st month, eye-watering in the 4th, cafe clearing in the 6th. I noticed in that piece there's a mention of a dog, and that's the last and most important thing that Santa Maddalena gave to me, a love of dogs. Previous to that, my family are Jamaican, and they think of dogs basically as large vermin. But in Italy, I came to love dogs and to get one of my own, a pug, that little dog described in Bea's apartment, and she's the light of my life, apart from my daughter, so thank you.
I never thought to call Beatrice Bea before. I think you've started something. Oh, she's the only one. Very good. The next reader, this makes me feel very old, was actually a student of mine. And his name is Andershan Greer, and he's the best-selling author of The Confessions of Max Tivoli, an absolutely wonderful book. The story collection, How It Was for Me, and the novels The Path of Minor Planets and The Story of a Marriage, another wonderful book. He's received an O. Henry Award and the New York Public Library Young Lions Fiction Award. He lives in San Francisco.
Well, now I think you're going to think that the main thing writers get from Santa Maddalena is the love of dogs, because after I went there, I also got a pug. And they've all met each other, and I don't think they get along at all. The 3 of them. I was the first time I went to Santa Maddalena, I've gone twice, so I'm not quite at Ed's level yet. I met Beatrice, and at dinner we had a conversation about books, and she said, "Andrew, I think you need an education, and we will start with a funeral." And she took me to the funeral of a great artist that she had represented in her gallery in Milan, Orazio. And the three of us, the four of us who were there, were staying there at the time, we all went and we dressed up in what we had that was as black as possible. We didn't know the man at all, but she introduced us to his paintings and to other artists who knew him. And we got to watch an extraordinary event. But she also started introducing us to books that might influence us, to more ancient art that might influence us, sort of trying to see anything that might ring a bell, you know, get something going. Because I had arrived there despairing about my second, not my second novel, but this novel, it happened, that's the end of the story, and telling her I just don't think I can do it, I think it's a terrible idea, it's like I've entered a bad marriage and I can't get out of it. And my mother would normally say, oh, that must be really hard, honey, I'm sure something will be great, you'll be wonderful. But Beatrice said, don't be stupid. You're a great writer and you will write a great book. And that was the end. No sympathy at all, but as if it were impossible that I wouldn't do it, and I thought, well, oh, okay, yes, yes, ma'am. And I did finish the book. I'll read you what I wrote there. But the second time I went to Santa Maddalena, she and I went to a flea market in Arezzo. It was a very, very hot day, and none of the Italians were there, and none of the sellers were really there, and we were finding nothing at all. Certainly nothing for me to bring back to San Francisco. And we were on our last little leg, and we walked by a nothing-looking stall, and I saw her eyes go sideways, and she said, keep going, keep going. And she said, it's a Orazio. A little painting over there. She said, how much do you have? I was like, well, how much is it going to cost? It's a Orazio. She said, she doesn't know it's a Orazio. The rest of the conversation, I had 100 euros, and that's what she managed to get the painting for me for. So it was a strange moment where I had gone to the funeral of the man whose paintings I'd never seen, and now I own one. It's hanging on my wall. But it was the kind of, I think Colm talked about the eye that she has, always looking for something special, even in a sort of pile of trash of that market that she could give me. One of the things she gave me that first time when she said she was sure I would write a good book was Grisha's book, The Snows of Yesteryear. And I had Grisha's studio at the time, which looks out over the valley and is full of windows and has vines that have made it into my novel and little honeybees that go and then they die at the end of the day. And that made it into my novel too. And all of his books and his old Olivetti. But mostly what I remember about the book is I understood the tone I needed to take in my own novel, which was unsentimental memory and intelligence, which he had more of than I do, without cleverness, and its intensity of description. And I remember reading that book and sitting down and writing a description of one of the main characters in The Story of a Marriage. The first thing people noticed in my husband was his looks. Tall, dark, with a comforting smile that seemed to hide nothing, the kind of effortless beauty that can't be marred by strain or illness, like something beaten out of gold, so that even if you bent it or melted it down, it would be a pure, beautiful thing. That's how I saw him, ever since I was a girl staring at him in our classroom. But I was not alone. It was how everybody saw him. Beauty is a warping lens. He had the kind of looks that are always greeted by grins and handshakes, extra glances, stares held for a moment longer than usual, a smile and a face not easily forgotten.